to become actually the first ever Chief Creative Officer of the Hellenic Republic by a direct mandate by the Prime Minister, the Greek Prime Minister, Kyriakos Mitsotakis. Steve, hi.
Great. Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you for having me.
Time this afternoon. I know you're quite a busy man.
I'm not as busy as the U.S. ambassador, nowhere near. So, and it's an honor to be here and following from him as well. So, thank you for having me.
Thank you. It strikes me, right? We live in a post-pandemic world, and we keep saying that the location is no longer relevant when it comes to work. So we can evangelize about the future of work. We can evangelize about remote working. And I'm wondering, based on your experience, would it be possible for a country like ours to build a new narrative that's going to be friendly for the digital nomad era that's coming?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's absolutely, if you read a lot of the discussion about what's happening, as you said, in the post-pandemic contactless society, returning to the way we were working, the way I used to commute 2 hours a day to get into London and get back home on the South Coast, it's not really conducive to creativity. And it's a complete waste of time in terms of productivity. So I think it's really interesting what has happened, where people had to have this very, very unfortunate, tragic event happen to realize and reappraise what's important in their lives and how productive they could be from anywhere. And the conversation that is happening, that I keep reading about, and I'm sure we're reading the same things, is not about work from home, it's about work from anywhere. And I was told on the guidelines not to be through a backlit source, but if I were to point my camera to the window, and I don't really have a massive view, but if you can work from anywhere in a contactless society, why wouldn't that be Greece? And that's what we need to be starting to really think about, because it's not just the sun and all that sort of stuff. It's a place that, as the ambassador was saying, has some huge ticket deals going on, some infrastructure and investment, the talent. So for me, it's a no-brainer that we should be here at this moment.
So we will incorporate in a way this narrative as part of the country's narrative moving forward.
Very much so. I think one of the key pillars, we're doing things around investment, around made and manufacturing, but one of the key ones is about living in Greece. And I think, again, these are my opinions, so I'm not going to speak on behalf of the government, but my opinion is you don't necessarily always have to compete like for like. It's going to be very difficult to compete with some of the things that are happening in the valley, the concentration, the equity, that sort of thing. But I think we have other things we can compete with here. And the balancing your work around your life is something that people are prioritizing more and more.
Makes sense. And one of the other things that was quite a trendy discussion point for many public and private conversation is the fourth industrial revolution, is the digitalization of life, of the public sector, of the private sector, of our everyday life, really. How important is to empower tech skills and the youth to acquire such skills in this new information and technology era? I guess someone has to build tech, right? It's not built itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I worked at Google for almost 10 years, and I have a very tech background, and I will sort of counter that because I think it's one of the things that we are going to talk about. So I'm jumping ahead, but it's not just tech; it's about creativity and the imagination economy. And I think tech very much is the enabler and the facilitator. But I think, and again, in the world that we're living in today, understanding interaction, understanding design, understanding the capabilities, programming, all these sorts of things, the capabilities that these things afford you are a must. And I think, again, I was relatively young, but I wasn't as young as my kids are now, learning about these incredible things. And I think, and learning how to use my brain in these ways to problem solve. So I think it's absolutely something that we need to keep pushing. And I think it's also something that we need to ensure that people from different backgrounds, whether they are older or whether they are from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds, have the same opportunities afforded to them. And that's where I see tech playing a critical role. Is, they used to call it the internet, the great democratizer, the great leveler. And I think if we are able to bring a lot of the people who are currently being left behind in the education system and that sort of thing with technology, I think that could be a massive game changer.
So you're essentially talking about reskilling and
reskilling, upskilling, digital skills and training, all these sorts of things that can augment someone's existing skill set, but by the same token, open up a whole new career path for them that they didn't know about necessarily because of their backgrounds.
So one might argue, would it be possible to land a job at Google or a tier 1 technology company in your 40s, right after graduating a reskilling or an upskilling course? Or
yeah,
is this a privilege?
I can't. Yeah, I don't work at Google, so I can't speak on their behalf right now. What I will tell you, something that I've spoken publicly about, is I was one of the first ever directors hired at Google. I think maybe the only director that I know of hired at Google without a university degree. I never finished my university degree. I didn't go to the art college that I wanted to go to because I couldn't afford to go to it. And I was hired as a director, a level A, and that's huge at Google. And I was hired because of the work that I had done. I guess, some of it may have, done all right. So I think, we mustn't sort of use that same grading and rating system across everyone, because not everyone can compete, and go to the types of schools that a lot of these people are drawing from. So I think we must look at raw ability and capability alongside, their educational credentials.
I have a last one, and that will be, in your opinion, what big tech companies, like the one you used to work before, are looking in the country in order to invest in its talent? Because, I mean, part of the conversation really for a country is to attract foreign investment, obviously in the startup world, but also in the corporate world. And we saw the Microsoft example. They acquired a Greek RPA software company. So for big tech, is it the quality of the engineers? Is it for the state to provide incentives and tax breaks for them to have R&D here?
If you look at what's happening, again, and I'm speaking on a personal level, if you look at what's happening in places like the US and Canada, there's a huge competition for talent. And there just aren't enough engineers in these places to fulfill the requirements of many of these tech companies. So they very much build their ecosystems around some of the universities that produce some of this best talent. So we absolutely need to be in that sort of range of considered set of schools that are producing the best engineers, which I think is great. And I think from what I'm being told, and I spent a lot of time at the Polytechnia and the universities in Crete, and I was seeing some incredible things that were coming out of these places, both in Chania and Iraklion. So I think the talent is there. And then I also think the things that, Ambassador Pyatt mentioned, the rapid transformation and digitization of the state, whereby there's a new level of automation and optimization, and all these things that are creating the conditions for people to remove bottlenecks and remove bureaucracy and go in and be able to do the things. I think they've just started and they're doing a phenomenal job in that ministry. So I think it's a combination and opportunity. I think, one of the things that I'm working with one of the ministries on is trying to create this this experimental place where we can pilot technologies in this country. So they're not necessarily being built purely for this market, because this market isn't anywhere near in size and scale as some of the other markets around the world. But if we can attract these technology companies through our programs and all these sorts of things that are being offered right across all different sectors, if we can get them here to pilot technologies and create this sandbox mentality in Greece, I think that could have a phenomenal effect on attracting talent and investment.
Wonderful. I think I have a question, which
I might need to put my glasses on if I have to read it.
you already partially covered this, but I'll make sure it has 2 votes. Would it be possible for someone to land a job, find a job in a tech sector without a degree? I think you shared your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, I did it, and it was funny. I mean, I don't want to monopolize the conversation because I know you're tight on time. I went through 22 interviews over 9 months at Google, where they did general cognitive ability rating with a laptop, and they asked me questions, and I got through 22 of them. I may have got lucky. And as I said, I didn't not finish because I didn't want to go to school. I couldn't afford to go to the one I wanted to go to, which was one of the top design colleges, because they were expensive. They are expensive, especially as an international student. So I think you can. And I know when I was at Google, they used to have criteria that was very much around, the best universities, the best grade point average. I think that's changed because they understand that that's not the case with everyone.
If you have a couple of minutes, one last question that has 4 votes, which is do you believe that we're at the beginning of a new brain drain away from low-wage countries to high-wage countries, as now it's much easier to recruit and retrain talent without the need to relocate? So
I don't know if I understand that, a second brain drain. I actually believe the opposite is going to happen. I believe post-pandemic, especially when people were stuck in places that they necessarily couldn't get out of and go and spend some time with their friends and family, where they were there purely for work. I think about, again, this is going to sound very existential, I think about my looming mortality. I think about what's ahead of me and where I want to be. And God forbid we don't get out of this thing, or another one happens and it's not contained as well as we contained it. Where do I want to be? Do I want to just be working to live, or do I want to be living with an element of work? And I believe, again, I'm not saying this as a provocation to get everybody to rush back, but if it works as a catalyst, it would be fantastic. I think people are going to appreciate and reappraise the value of being in a place like this, being with the people you want to be with, and being able to make a decent living. And I think we need to, we obviously need to deliver against that decent living thing as well. And I think things are happening in that space. So I don't think we'll have a second one, and I hope we don't have a second one. I think we'll have a proper reversal. It's just a prediction.
My percent will be, if you work based in Greece for an international company, you're actually based in Greece. So I don't see this as a brain drain. You actually in your country. So it's
I mean, that is the ideal scenario, isn't it? I mean, there are international, multinational companies who are allowing their key workers to work out of Greece, and they are happy, and that happiness is manifesting itself through their productivity, and they're loyal, and they have low churn. There are so many different factors that make for a successful company, and I think just showing up and commuting and slogging your way into a company every morning and have a physical presence isn't necessarily how successful companies are built. It's actually the antithesis, I would say.
That's a wonderful statement to close this session. Steve, thank you. Thank you so much
for having me, everyone, and for listening to me.
Thank you.
Okay.
The Chief Creative Officer for the Hellenic Republic, Mr. Steve Vranakis. And with that,